Hello and welcome to the off-season edition of the CBB Super Show. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85. We're doing our thing here. We are definitely going to continue, even with the season over, to give you that top-notch content that you've come to know and love. We don't have the full setup yet. In the off-season, I'm playing around with some different backgrounds, where I want to be, depending on if I'm going to have an office area or if I'm going to do it from the dining area. So bear with me. I've got the bare walls in the back here, still messing around with everything, still having to fully get set up here. Let's fix this a little bit. But what we're going to be doing here for the next several weeks is talk about the off season, the college basketball transfer portal, perhaps coaching changes, things of that nature, right? We're going to be really delving in, talking all about the different changes to team rosters. And I think that's going to be really beneficial for everyone in terms of previewing, being ready for the season, talking about these changes, how they're going to affect teams, who's going to be productive for DFS purposes, who's going to go from a high usage player to a irrelevant player, who's going to go from an irrelevant player to high usage, all these different things that I feel really, really good about that we're going to break down over the next 6-7 weeks, each and every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. PST, midnight EST. If you guys can't watch live, I totally understand. There's a lot going on, but please continue to support the show at any means that you can. If you watch it on demand, I definitely appreciate that as well. I know you use the FTN Network and my own content for purposes of betting, DFS, fantasy, all that stuff, but the powers that be at FTN have granted me the ability to talk once a week about off-season CBB stuff, and I really want to continue to grow the brand, really want to continue to be the one-stop shop for all things college basketball. And what this is going to do is, like I said, really set us apart from the competition, and it's going to make it so where you are going to be extremely knowledgeable about mid-major teams, low-major teams, all the roster changes. You're going to know all this stuff as we get into September, October, and into November. You're going to be ahead of the game. You're already going to know, oh, wow, this kid for Boise State, he's going to be really good. I know all about him. He's 4.5K on slate 1. What's up with that? Nobody else knows about him. Let's rock and roll. My man Dub told me all about him. So I'm really looking forward to that. We'll be rolling this way until probably the mid to end of July. What this is going to do is allow us to go into college football season, and we're going to, in July there, the middle part of the season, go into college football previews by conference, and we're going to break down portal changes, roster changes, who's going to be relevant, positional battles, all that stuff. We're going to give you all the college football preview content you can handle so that when the college football season starts at the end of August, you'll be completely prepared. We'll have already talked about those previews for over a month, and you'll be completely ready to flesh out and build the best possible lineups, knock the competition out, and win lots and lots of money. So, previews of the college basketball offseason for the next, like I said, 6 to 7 weeks. That will take us into college football season. in the previews there. We'll also be talking about TBT stuff. We'll have content there for prize picks and betting props opportunity for TBT. Probably won't have TBT DFS. We haven't had that since the COVID year, but we can keep our fingers crossed. We've also begun to do the alt football thing. Last week, I had my first article for the USFL. We'll, of course, have CFL, Canadian football, coming on. So if you're into alt football, we got our guys covering the XFL as well. Lots of opportunities. I will also be covering the WNBA with slate breakdowns each and every day there, covering that sport. We'll also do some shows here or there. So the content will continue to come from the DFS and betting side. The Wednesday Night Super Show is just a platform for us to talk about off-season news and college basketball stuff and really show you guys that we're more than just a fantasy and betting company. We want to be, or I want to be, a sports media, guy, and I want to continue to grow the brand. And one day I want the Super Show to be on a television or satellite radio, whatever it is. I want to be a destination where kids come to, say where they're going to go to school or where they're going to transfer to. And eventually, we're going to do that. We're going to have player interviews. We're going to have coaching interviews. I'm really, really confident in the direction of this show. And I think we're going to be doing some really special things. And I appreciate everybody who has joined me on this journey and will continue to do so, as I said, throughout the next 6 to 7 weeks, covering the massive changes that have already happened and the massive changes that will continue to happen, and lots of stuff to talk about each and every week. Give me a second here. I got to grab one thing. Improve the sound quality here. I haven't fully, you guys know I just moved, so I haven't got my setup yet. Don't want it to be too echoey, poor quality. There we go. There we go. All right, we're mic'd up. We're ready to go. So with that being said, the world famous FTN Network has given us this platform. I appreciate them. Meanie, Randall, everybody at the network. Let's jump into it. Let's talk about the college basketball offseason and the portal moves that have happened so far. There has been just a plethora of things that have happened. Briefly talked about it during the Final Four and championship slate, a little bit off kilter there, but there has been just an insane amount of stuff to go down here. We did see, I want to start with St. John's here and talk about it. I'm going to, starting next week, I'm really going to go into conference breakdowns and really, kind of label the shows like this is the ACC, off-season, show. This one I'm going to use as kind of to bounce around and talk about the different things that are going on. This first one here with St. John's, of course, Rick Pitino taking the helm. He is the St. John's head coach, making some moves here, doing some things. The plan is for the team to build around Joel Soriano. We saw during the press conference when Pitino took the job, he was just about it, just totally all about this man here, Joel Soriano. He is just completely enamored with him, talking about building the team around him. They are just, really going to force feed him the ball, and that's not a bad thing for us for DFS purposes. It's going to be great. The other kid that he really liked, and the only other St. John's player from this past season that stayed, was Drisa Traore, who he's also really excited about. I don't know that I personally see Traore being fantasy relevant, but for whatever reason, Pitino's really enamored with him. He's really enamored with Joel Soriano. So those two guys are back. That's who they're going to build the team around, mainly Joel Soriano. They missed out on Walter Clayton, who is the guard that he had with him from Iona, just an amazing scorer. Hometown kid, home state of Florida. He decides to go to the Florida Gators instead of St. John's. Definitely hurt my heart there as a St. John's fan. Obviously, I'm on the West Coast. I love the Huskies. That's my team. But my East Coast team is St. John's by far. Hurt my heart for them not to get Clayton. I thought he would do really, really well there. So they miss out on him. They miss out on Chris Ledlum, who, if you guys are in the CBB DFS room, Stills and I talk all the time. A few of us, Adam, a few of the others are always in there talking about, the different transfer news. I mean, there's so much happening all the time. Chris Ledlum, a stud from Harvard, he was thought to be going to St. John's, or at least they were in the mix. He decides to go to Tennessee, so that is a second whiff for St. John's here. But they did bring in some guys, right? Not getting Walter Clayton definitely hurt, but they do bring in Dennis Jenkins, who also played under Pitino here for Iona, one half of that backcourt next to Walter Clayton. Jenkins and Clayton were both just absolutely elite level scorers at every level. Great passers. Jenkins had almost a 30% assist rate. 3-point shooting, Clayton, of course, 44% compared to Jenkins, 36%. So there's a disparity there, but still Jenkins just under 40%. Good enough. 80% free throw shooter. Steal rate of almost 2.5%. Shot rate was over 26%. Usage rate over 26%. Jenkins definitely is a strong player and will do well under Rick Pitino. So it's not a consolation prize. I certainly don't want to diminish anything here with Jenkins, but it is important to talk about. Jenkins has a lot of experience, not only the one season that he played for Pitino, but he started off at Pacific, for a couple of seasons there at the WCC level. His second year, 2021, right after the COVID season for Pacific, he had a pretty solid sophomore season. Shot rate was high. He had a bunch of games where he was asked to play 30, 35 minutes, scored a bunch, hit some threes. His assist rate was high, had his high steal rate. Like, you could see there was the makings of a really talented and solid player there for Pacific. Ends up leaving them, goes to the JUCO level where he tears it up. And then he transfers back into Division I basketball where he plays for Iona, has just an absolute great season. As you know, we talked about Iona there during the March Madness show. We were all upset that they ended up having to, play a tough first-round matchup. But Jenkins, definitely a guy that they can, utilize big minutes to run the offense for this team. Just, a rising a player who's definitely going to be able to do some serious damage here. Average 16 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, 5 assists. Again, shot over 40%. Has another season. He might even have 2 seasons. I'm not sure on that. So get a little confused there in the COVID year, but obviously at least the one season there. So obviously having Walter Clayton, who's a little younger, for a couple more years and a more prolific scorer would have been better, but better for us as DFS players, not necessarily better for St. John's as a program to win, because Dennis Jenkins, at the end of the day, he's a better passer than Clayton, and he's going to be able to, make that entry pass, which you'd think coming up playing basketball in the 90s, making that post-feed entry pass was something that just seemed second nature. You're like, you got to feed the big man, make a bounce pass, get him the rock. You just don't see that as much now, and with everybody running to shoot threes, guys can't make the entry pass, and it's a little bit frustrating. Dennis Jenkins is a guy who can make the entry pass to Joel Soriano, and I think the two-man game between those guys will be good. I think that right now, as it stands, St. John's roster, it needs a lot of work, right? They lost everyone except for 2 players. But with Jenkins and Soriano, they're at least going to be competitive, and they're going to win a bunch of games in the non-con, and they're going to definitely be able to run the style of basketball that was a little bit more popular in the 90s. But you have a alpha 1A, and then you have an alpha 1B, and then you have a bunch of role players who know what they're supposed to do. If they're defensive stoppers, 3-point specialists, rebounders, and Pitino seems to be building a roster with that in mind. Now, as it stands right now, the rest of the lineup is a bit underwhelming. They do bring in Naheem Aline from UConn, the world champion UConn Huskies, to be a 3-point specialist there and score the rock. That's something that St. John's was lacking this past season. They just didn't have shooters. They brought David Jones in. Stills and I both said, he's good, but he's not your primary 3-point shooter. He's not the guy that's going to be able to hit a shot when you need it. You need to be able to find other 3-point shooters. Hopefully they do it. Mike didn't do it. Mike Anderson is gone. So Naheem Aline coming over from UConn, that helps St. John's definitely. As it stands, he could certainly start in the backcourt or even as a 3. But it'd be better if he came off the bench. They do bring in Sean Conway, who is an VMI transfer. Sean Conway had some offers from other higher major programs as well. 36% 3-point shooter on volume, almost 150 attempts. He was more of a secondary player even for VMI, but he definitely got shots up. He played with that freshman Asher Woods, who was very good. Tony Felder, real solid freshman group that they had there. Tyler Hauser, Ricky Bradley. Like VMI had some real good talent there. Conway has mainly just been a three-point guy throughout his career. Did have a solid offensive rebounding rate, actually a career high offensive rebounding rate, top 20 in the conference there. We saw him in he missed a few games, but prior to being banged up and missing time, we saw there were several games there in the middle part of January where he was taking 7 to 10 threes, scoring 15 to 20 real points, and contributing a decent amount on the rebounding side as well, somewhere between 2 to 5 rebounds per game. So again, another role player that they're bringing in, definitely solid. I don't think he's a starter. He is, especially with the Big East, taking this step up this past season and will probably continue to step up. What's up, Johnny? Johnny in the house. So they have guys who can play, but this is a much stronger Big East, and arguably everybody says that the Big 12 is the best conference, and they have been to this point, but the Big East is definitely taking that step towards being considered one of, if not the toughest conference in all of college basketball. And we may see them send multiple teams to the Elite Eight, Final Four, and possibly being a champion once again, whether that's UConn, whether that's Marquette, whether that's, Villanova, probably not. But this is not going to get it done. This Jenkins, Soriano, Conway, Elaine group. They do bring over Cruz Davis, who is another player from Iona. A man, Corey in our group chat, making the joke that it's the St. John's Gales. It was to be expected that Pitino would bring some Iona guys with him. I would have thought at that point, if you're going to do it, you bring over Walter Clayton, Nelly Jr. Joseph, even though Nelly's not a good fit stylistically next to Soriano, and he ended up going to New Mexico, which we'll talk about at some point this summer. But those two guys, that would have been who I would want to prioritize. Both had multiple years left. But you get Jenkins, Cruz Davis, who he's a pretty young kid, actually. So, I can't really talk him down. He was definitely a raw freshman. He had a really strong steal rate when he got minutes. He shot about 32% from long range. As I mentioned, pretty raw. He didn't end up playing most of the last month of the season. Had some spot starts throughout. There was a game against Quinnipiac. He played 35 minutes as a starter, a 25% usage rate. Had shot 4 for 11, had 13 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. A pretty solid game there. He also had a game where he played 29 minutes in a spot start against Ryder, 10 points, 3 rebounds, had 3 steals. Definitely a guy that I think Pitino can turn into a defensive specialist and a spot starter when they need, but again, not a guy that they're going to be able to really rely on. They do today bring in another Iona player, which there's not very many left. I think Barrick Jean Louise is out of eligibility here, but Quinn Zielinski is who they bring in. Zielinski, of course, played a couple of seasons for Louisville, some pretty uneventful years for Louisville. Really strong season last year. Iona had a very high shot rate, career high in three-point percentage. Just really a solid season overall. He had some injuries this year that really just made it to where he couldn't, play. But there were games early in the season against Hofstra and Penn before long-term injuries kicked in where he played over 30 minutes, 20 points, 10 rebounds against Hofstra. He had 16 and 5 against Penn. He had a game against SMU when he came back in mid-December, 8 points, 4 rebounds, had a couple of blocks. Just a guy that can definitely contribute in multiple categories, and we know that. He can play as a stretch big, or he can also bang down low, but he's definitely a guy they can use. But again, he's more of a role player, more of a guy that is a nice rotational / depth piece, but he's not a guy that you're going to be able to rely on to play these 30-plus minutes, because at this level in the Big East, you need dudes, and I just am not so sure that St. John's has the quote-unquote dudes that they need to compete here just yet. But that's okay. As it stands right now, you have Drisa Tour, you have Joel Soriano, Naheem Aline, Sean Conway, Dennis Jenkins, Cruz Davis, and Zielinski. That gives you 8 players there. Obviously have some more. If that's your rotation, it's tough. If you bring in 1 or 2 more name players, As I mentioned earlier, like Ledlum, if they would have got him, I know he went to Tennessee, but somebody like that, plus a secondary piece that can score when you need a bucket, then I think this roster looks really good. If they bring in 2 to 3 more what I deem to be role player or specialists, it's going to be really tough. At that point, you should have, really done whatever it took to bring Storr back, whatever it took to bring Posh Alexander back, and whatever it took to bring Dylan Adewusu back. That would have been a much better roster. So we'll see. It's Patino, so got to give him the benefit of the doubt, but there's definitely some work to be done here for this St. John squad by far. Other news, my Huskies are in on Ray Battle. Raquan Battle decides to leave Montana State. His coach, Danny Springle, takes the Utah State job. So there is a lot of talk about him heading to Utah State. Now, John Rothstein said there was a Final Four or a top four of sorts, which Arizona was in, San Francisco was in, Washington was in, and I believe South Florida was in. But now I'm hearing that might not be the actual top four, so I don't know where we stand there. It'd be great to welcome Ray back. He is a phenomenal scorer, nice shooter. Defensively, he needed work when he left Washington. It's definitely been an improvement. They're in on him, so I'm glad to hear that. The Huskies are also, what I said about this roster, we've brought in Moses Wood. That was a nice get. I'm very, very happy with us getting Moses Wood from Portland. He has experience in other P5 programs. He's transferred around. He's played at different levels. He spent the year with Tulane. He spent a year or two with UNLV. Now he's coming to Washington where he can play the stretch big role. He can hit some threes. One of the things that hurt the Huskies this past season was their inability to make shots and shoot threes. They bring Moses Wood in, who can definitely do that. Keon Brooks returns, which I'm ecstatic about. I was really hopeful that he would come back, and he is. Frank Kepnong, we already know he's back. Corin Johnson, who I still believe is going to be a program all-time guard when it's all said and done. Really excited about him. Braxton Mia's back, so we've got key pieces returning. We've got Moses Wood in the house. We've got some really nice stuff going on. What I said was we need a point guard to tie it all together, and it sounds like we are in on a point guard that is going to be a really good fit here. If it's true and we actually do get him, I of course don't want to get too excited and have it not happen, but of course Kentucky transfer and Georgia transfer Severe Wheeler. That is the current rumors right now, to go along with the two that we've already brought in, Moses Wood, who can be an instant starter, and Anthony Holland, who can hit threes, can play the type of defense that Hopkins demands from Fresno. I like what we're doing here. I like the pieces we've brought back. Got to have a point guard. Corin Johnson, I like him a little bit more as a off-ball scoring guard slash run the offense or initiate offense when he needs to. They bring in Wesley Yates, the Texas kid, who is kind of a hybrid 2-3. He's going to be really good. And we just got Christian King, who is a local Seattle kid as well. So we've got a really nice group here right now, but we definitely need a point guard. And Severe Wheeler is certainly atop my wish list at this point. Once I found out we were not going to get Taron Armstrong, once it became pretty obvious that he was either going to go to Gonzaga or one of these other big time programs and head from Cal Baptist, where he has the top 20 assist rate, had to turn my attention elsewhere. Wasn't sure what point guards were going to be available to us. At the end of the day, I thought Corin Johnson can definitely be that guy if we need him to. But in what we have this pipeline of Kentucky to Washington guys, right? Quade Green, Keon Brooks, might Severe Wheeler be next? It's definitely possible. Severe Wheeler spent a lot of time injured this past season, but we know from his time at Georgia, he is an elite passer. He can score a little bit. He's not a very good three-point shooter, although he did shoot 36% this past season. However, only 41 attempts. He's never been a big attempts guy. There have been games where he's been able to score, and he has proven that. He won't need to be that role at Washington. He's got scorers around him. He just needs to feed the rock to Keon. He needs to drive and dish to Moses Wood. He needs to give it to Corin Johnson and space and let these guys work. And I think Severe in this offense, assuming he comes, can average, 7.5 assists per game. I really honestly do, because he's going to be afforded the opportunity, as long as he's healthy, to play 35, 36, 37 minutes per game. Hop will ride him and play him a lot. We know that we lost a ton. I mean, the Washington Huskies, they didn't flip the roster over like St. John's, but Keon Menafield gone off to the SEC. That one hurt me a little bit, especially since he said he was going to come back, but I'm okay with it. PJ Fuller is gone, a local kid who came back. I'm glad he spent some time here. It didn't work out. I hope he goes somewhere he can play some minutes. Noah Williams, he had that really good year number 2 with Washington State. Hasn't really captured that magic, hasn't been able to stay healthy, so he's gone. Cole Bajema leaves. He's off to Utah, so we'll see him a couple times this season. Jamal Bay is out of eligibility. Langston Wilson heads out. He was the top JUCO kid a couple of years ago. Fit just didn't work. And Jackson Grant, who decided to go to Montana State, but he's also backed out of Montana State and is back on the market as well. And Montana State is having, as you can imagine, with the new coach coming in, a ton of turnover there. So the Huskies have had a huge amount of transfers, but I got to tell you, as long as we didn't lose Corin Johnson and we didn't lose Keon Brooks, the rest of the pieces, while they were decent enough, it wasn't a program crippling loss by any means. Langston Wilson, great kid. Like him a lot, but just doesn't fit on this team. Jackson Grant's really raw. Probably not a high-level P5 player at this moment in time. Needs some time to develop. He's just not going to get it here. Noah Williams can't stay healthy. That sucks. PJ Fuller can't stay healthy. That sucks. And Keon Menafield, that one definitely hurt. If anything was going to hurt us a lot, it was Menafield. But I still think of the two, Menafield and Corin Johnson is a better player. His upside is better. His future is better. And I think collegiately, he'll stay longer than Menafield. He's got a more complete game than Menafield. And at the end of the day, he's going to be an all-timer for this Washington Huskies program. I said that since day one, and I will continue to harp on that till the end of his career, which is going to be very, very good. All right, so other news today, we'll just go through and talk about it, because there's been a ton of transfers. Noah Reynolds, who decided to transfer to Wisconsin, has decided to back out of Wisconsin, so he's back on the market now, a Wyoming role player. We've seen a couple of guys back out of their original commitments. We did see Zane Meeks go from San Fran over to Arizona State. Arizona State has lost a lot of pieces either to graduation or to the transfer portal, so they need to load up on players. They get a pretty decent one in Zane Meeks. And then the big winner of today, I didn't even see this one before I came on the air. I'll talk about this in a second. But the big winner today is UNLV. Keelan Boone, who was at Pacific this year, had a really nice season. I talked a little bit about him in that WCC tournament. He was really good in a game or two, but towards that end of the season, he just looked so confident, and I just really felt like he was going to end up transferring and going to a higher level. Like, I thought he'd go back to the P5 for sure. And then I started wondering about when I saw Caleb Boone hit the portal, like, hey, might the brothers reunite here for their final collegiate year and try to do some damage together? Where might that be? And I thought there was a chance they would go back to, like a Big 12 program or maybe even the Pac-12, being on the West Coast there for a year for Keelan. But they decide to go to the UNLV Running Rebels together, package deal, Caleb and Keelan Boone together. I do like this fit for them. It makes UNLV relevant again for me. The Mountain West, which I was really down on this past year going into the season. I know the Mountain West finished pretty good. They had tournament teams, whatever, but this was a really down year overall for the Mountain West for me. There was a lot of guys gone. David Roddy for Colorado State, who's a unicorn. Losing a player of that caliber is tough. And just from top to bottom, we saw a really weaker conference. But I think we're going to see a much more competitive conference, more parity, and a lot of good teams. And UNLV is definitely on that list for being a strong team. Now, not only did they get the Boone brothers, but they also bring in Jalen Hill from Oklahoma, who is a inconsistent, yes, player, but playing for Porter Moser, you usually don't get minutes unless you play solid or strong, borderline elite defense. And Jalen Hill is somebody who doesn't necessarily strike me as a elite defender. He's adequate, gives you good minutes. He can hit shots. He rebounds at a decent enough level. I think at the Mountain West level, he can definitely show a lot more than what he did at the Big 12 level. There were games throughout the maybe last month and a half where he looked like a totally different player. You saw a streak there in early February. I'll read it off for you against Kansas, 14-5, had a couple of steals in that one. That was in 28 minutes. Kansas State in 36 minutes, 12.7 rebounds, 2 assists. In an overtime game in 41 minutes against Texas, 11 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals. Just had a really nice stretch. And he especially showed out against Alabama when they, it was a tough year for Oklahoma, really tough. But they absolutely just annihilated Alabama back in the end of January, 93-69. In that game, Jalen Hill had 26 points. He shot 7 of 9 on 2-point field goals, knocked down both of his threes, 8 rebounds, 2 assists. That to me was a game like, wow, the athleticism that Alabama has. Jalen Hill really showed out. He looked very comfortable. That could be something we see from Jalen Hill on a nightly basis at a conference like the MWC. So the UNLV Running Rebels, clearly the winners of today. It's very early still in the portal. They'll have to add more pieces, definitely, but a good day for sure, adding the Boone brothers and Jalen Hill. Still need some guard play. They'll still need a wing. They'll still need some other pieces, of course, but, they've got guys there, Shane Noel, was it Jackie Johnson? They got the high school kid actually from south of Seattle, a kid I'm familiar with from Lacey, Brooklyn Hicks. They've got him coming in. They've got some pieces. This UNLV team is actually pretty decent looking all of a sudden. I'm kind of feeling what they've got here. So liking UNLV. Now, I'm going to talk a lot about Boise State, by the way, this all summer. Boise State is the team that I love. So going back to and talking about how Boise State's going to be a much more improved team, they have brought in some really good pieces that I've harped on quite a bit, honestly. They have, made themselves a much stronger, considering who they've lost and who is going to be out and moving on to the pro level. Big Shot Shaver has exhausted his eligibility. That's going to be a large hole to fill. But they've got guys coming in that I feel really good about. And this is a team that I think can make some noise here. I think can go back to the tournament. They bring in Omar Stanley, a St. John's cast-off. He is a strong rebounder, a decent enough defender, somebody at the MWC level that can really put up numbers. So I feel good about him. Cam Martin. Going to talk about this a lot this summer, but Kansas had an embarrassment of talent. They recruited well. Bill Self doesn't necessarily play his young players. We know that. He had to play Grady Dick, but his young big men especially generally don't get minutes, and we see him oftentimes not use his bench. And that meant guys like Joseph Yesefu, who we know from his time at Drake is a good scorer. MJ Rice, who, highly, highly ranked recruit, barely played. Bobby Pettiford, who has honestly wasted 2 years at Kansas. Zach Clements. There has been some really talented guys for Kansas that have hit the portal and found new homes. And one of those guys is Cam Martin, who was a JUCO transfer originally, but he was a very high-level JUCO player. He goes over to Boise State to play a stretch 4 role. Remember the name Cam Martin. He's an older kid. I really like him in this Boise State lineup. I think he starts from day one. I think he has a lot to offer, and I think he should have got more of a fair shake at Kansas and gotten to play more because he is really, really good. D2 level or D1 level player that definitely deserves your attention. At the D2 level, he averaged like 25 and 10. He's just a ridiculous player. And he started off his career at Jacksonville State, so he at least had that, coming out of high school, that D1 level talent there. But the fact of the matter is he deserves minutes, and playing for Boise State, he is going to put up some really solid numbers. I like him quite a bit. Now, the big player to know is Roddy Anderson. He's the one I harped on during the Final Four and championship show because he's going to be my guy. Transferring over to Boise State, I really love this kid. As a freshman, he put up some pretty solid numbers, the type of numbers that only a handful of guys actually did put up. The stat line was 13 points per game, 3.5 rebounds per game, 3.5 assists per game. Now, you might look at that and be like, well, that doesn't sound that great. However, there were only 3 freshmen in all of Division I who averaged those stats. You got a bunch that averaged over 15 points per game, but only 1 rebound, 2 assists. You had a few that averaged 4 assists per game, but only 4 points. You had a few that averaged 8 rebounds, 4 points, no assists. Like, those categories, fine. But to average 13, 3.5 was only done by 2 other players, one of which is a kid that we'll talk about here in a second that transferred to Virginia, Andrew Rode. He also averaged those numbers. He was one of the others, and then Keontae George. So Roddy Anderson was in really good company for those stats. Played for UC San Diego, going over to Boise State. I think he's going to be really good. This Boise State team is not to be slept on. I know that we don't have futures available to us just yet, but I want to let you know, Mountain West futures, Boise State, depending on what they come out as, that's the team to watch. They are going to be just fine despite losing a plethora of the talent that they just had for this previous tournament team. All right. Other news today, Darius Maddox. I didn't see this one prior to the show, but Virginia Tech transfer Darius Maddox is headed to George Mason. George Mason has done a really good job here in the portal. They've obviously lost a fair amount of players heading over to Providence. Josh Oduro following Kimmy English, their coach there at Providence now. Oduro, a big one. Devontae Gaines heading over to Providence as well. So, talent leaving them, but they bring in some pieces here that are definitely going to start them off right. Darius Maddox, a good enough shooter. Jared Billups from Siena, one of their top 2 players, a very good scorer, and overall his skill set was good. And they bring in the power forward Amari Kelly from UNCW. Just really, really solid pieces for this George Mason squad. I think that you're going to see them win some games this year in a conference that could potentially be wide open, especially with pieces in the A10 that have left. Dayton has very likely going to be without, their top 2 to 3 players via either graduation, pro level, or transfer. And that's going to be a wide open conference here. And I think George Mason can definitely do some damage. Amari Kelly has been around. He played for Duquesne early in his career, spent the last 2 for Wilmington, a really strong rebounder, a strong shot blocker, somebody that will fit in with the George Mason program. So give it up to George Mason. They have done some pretty solid work in the portal the last couple of days and brought in some pieces that are definitely going to do well. Greg Gant of NC State headed over to UNC Asheville, so that's where he went. Tarleton State's Shamir Bogues heading to Vermont. Shaw Bogues is actually a pretty solid player, borderline stud at times. I thought he might go to a little higher level of a program, but he's definitely a guy that can do some damage, make some noise, and going to a program like Vermont that churns out, solid guards. Bogues is going to a spot where he can definitely play well and produce for that Vermont program. So good for him. Chris Ledlam, the Harvard kid, he heads to Tennessee. See Johnny mentioned that in the chat. He was somebody that St. John's was on. You see these Ivy League kids, they aren't able to take their grad year there because Ivy League only allows you to play 4 years. So guys like Ledlam and other talented players throughout the years have walked on to other programs, not literally walk on, but go to other programs where they do well. Ledlam is a kid who had a phenomenal season. Shot rate 34.5%, which is second best in the Ivy League, 13th in the country. 32.5% usage rate. That was first in the Ivy League, 22nd in the country. 4.5% block rate, 3.5% steal rate, 9.5% offensive rebounding rate, 24% defensive rebounding rate. And you know what? He's about 6'6", 6'7". So he's doing, playing a lot bigger, but he's also hitting threes, shot about 31% on volume, 130 attempts. So somebody who can score at the different levels and is right about a 66, 67% free throw shooter. So the Brooklyn kid coming to Tennessee to play for Ricky Barnes. The last 3 games of the season, some real strong numbers against Cornell, 35-13, against Princeton, 14-14, and then against Dartmouth, 18-3-2. That was the game that they ended up losing there and getting knocked out. But Ledlam is definitely a talented player and a good piece. The Vols have lost a lot of players, so getting him in there definitely is going to help them stop some of the bleeding there and get some veterans, because some of the freshmen that Tennessee have been bringing in the last couple of years have been good, but they've been a little bit on the young side. Now they're getting some veterans. Santiago Vescovi is going to use his COVID year, so he's coming back. They've got him. They bring in Jordan Gainey, who I love. I love Jordan Gainey. If you're not familiar with him, get to know him. USC Upstate from the Big South. That was a team I thought had a shot to possibly come out and win the Big South tournament. They gave Asheville the game. They beat Asheville in the regular season. They beat Longwood during the regular season, and they gave Asheville all they could handle there. And a lot of that was because of Jordan Gainey. Jordan Gainey's a coach's kid, and there's a reason he's probably going to Tennessee, not just because of that, because of his dad is an associate head coach for your Vols, but he's got the talent to warrant being there as well. Looking at it, rates wise, 31% shot rate, 28% usage rate, shot about 35% from long range, 76% free throw shooter, 44% on 2-point field goals. Needs to work on some of his other fundamentals, his passing ability. He's going to have to initiate the offense a little bit more. But you look at some of the games he had, Indiana State, 18 points, 4 rebounds, 2 steals, a block. Just that was in one of those secondary tournaments to end the season against Asheville. He had his struggles for sure, but he affected the games in other ways. The tournament game before that against Gardner-Webb, he had 25 points, taking just a ton of threes, and he's going to be afforded that opportunity for Rick Barnes and a sometimes stagnant offense to kickstart them and hit shots and make things happen. Hopefully he'll be in the gym all summer long. I'm sure he will, taking hundreds and hundreds and thousands of threes, free throws, all of his jump shots, because he has the opportunity to be really, really good for this Vols program. And I think that they got themselves a good one. Don't sleep on the USC Upstate kids. Now, talking to a couple buddies of mine, I think, honestly, the opportunity that guys can get, these fringe top 100 kids who generally in the past would go to Duke or go to Kansas or go to Kentucky, ride the pine, play 3.5 minutes per game, not get noticed, and then maybe develop over a couple of seasons, and then by their junior year play or, end up transferring out. Wasted time. Why not go to a low major, mid major, or a fringe P5 that could use you and play you lots of minutes, absolutely detonate, smash, have a huge year, and then get that call to the NBA, or get into the transfer portal where you can pick anyone you want. Look at Ledlam from Harvard. I know that, it took him a few years and he had to leave because of the Ivy League thing, but you look at him, all the attention, all the programs that were on him, all the teams that wanted him. You look at Walter Clayton from Iona, all the P5 programs that wanted him. There's just a lot to be said about going to a low to mid-major team, absolutely smashing it for a year, maybe 2, and then hitting the portal and having basically any program in the country going after you, making that choice and sliding in there and playing for a big role. You have NIL, so you have that opportunity to make big money now. It just makes a lot of sense. So wanted to mention that because you're seeing a lot of low to mid-major guys get P5 gigs now. And one of them, this is a good segue for me into the Virginia Cavaliers, is Andrew Rode, player here who for St. Thomas, as I mentioned, one of 3 freshmen along with my guy, Roddy Anderson, who averaged 13, 3.5, and 3.5 in 31 games this season. He actually averaged 17 points per game for the Summit St. Thomas, almost 4 assists, almost 4 rebounds, shot about 32% from long range. Needs to work on that a little bit. 2-point field goal, shot 54%, a lot of high percentage looks, right about a 45% shooter when you combine all. And I know Johnny's going to like this. He was an 82% free throw shooter. He is going to be very, very special. I tweeted this out after Virginia picked him up, but he is exactly the type of player that Coach Bennett can turn into an absolute monster. He was already putting up big numbers at St. Thomas, and this is a perfect example. A kid who, got a little love coming out of high school, but goes to St. Thomas. Nobody's talking about him. Nobody's paying attention. He's putting up these big numbers. He hits the portal. Suddenly he's got tons of P5 love, lots of opportunity, lots of kids or programs, I should say, looking to sign him. He goes to Virginia, a team that is as much maligned. A lot of people, they get knocked out in the first round. And they won a title. At the end of the day, Virginia won a title. They haven't necessarily had the roster that they did during that title run. They've had some pieces kind of in and out. And Virginia's offense has been pretty lackadaisical recently, and especially true last season. It just didn't seem like they could get a bucket when they needed one. But bringing in Andrew Rode, that won't be a problem. He will be able to initiate the offense. He will be able to get a bucket when they need one. They also have Dante Harris, the Georgetown transfer from last season. He will be eligible. They're bringing him in, which is going to be great. They've got Ryan Dunn and Isaac McNeely, two young kids who are going to continue to develop in this program. Jordan Minor, who, can play the 4, maybe some small ball 5. He was a Merrimack transfer. Merrimack, who actually played really well this season. We know they, because of their D1 application in the Northeast, they weren't eligible to make the tournament, but they didn't lose any games. The last time they lost was January 28th. They rolled through the NEC tournament. They rolled through the back half of their conference season. Really, really good. It's a damn shame they couldn't play there. But a lot of their players now have transferred on and gotten to be with other programs, one of which is Jordan Minor, who comes to Virginia as a absolute perfect piece. Look at some of his rates here. 16th highest usage rate in the country, top 70 shot rate, a combined rebounding rate over 30%, top 80 on the offensive glass, an assist rate of 21%, a block rate of 8.5%, steal rate of 3%. Doesn't shoot threes, but that's okay. They won't need him to. But he did a lot of Derek Walker-esque things. It's kind of what I'm going to say when I'm talking about a 4 or 5 where the offense runs through him. That top of the key or the high post. Walker, we know, had a high assist rate because literally the offense ran through him all the time, and that's kind of the way they did it with Jordan Minor. He's coming into a really good situation playing for this team. Might be able to see a little bit of a Diakate type of role for him, where I think he could be really, really good, and offensively might even be better. Obviously, the road kid I'm high on. I think he's going to be great. And Dante Harris, we know from seeing him at Georgetown, he can play. Kihei Clark, bye-bye. Long overdue. Get the hell out of here. Let's bring in Harris. Let's bring in Rode. Let's bring in Minor. I'm actually pretty excited about this Virginia squad. I think they'll be pretty damn good offensively and overall. And they're a team that I think has a chance to, be the Elite Eight and possibly even a Final Four squad here, depending on how the rest of the lineup shakes out. What's up, Sam? Says Auburn has good guards this year. Some scorers need Cleveland to commit to us. Matthew Cleveland, yeah. If Auburn got Matthew Cleveland, that would be phenomenal. Auburn, under Pearl, they have such a great offense. Their defense is good enough. A guy like Cleveland would really thrive there for sure. Taron Armstrong to Gonzaga rumors. Yeah, they might be back on him actually, but as of and things change so fast, man, so fast. I talked to a lot of guys and a lot of beats who are way more plugged in than me. But it sounded like they were out on Taron Armstrong. Like Gonzaga is so laser focused on Nembhard that they kind of moved away from Taron Armstrong. If they whiff Nembhard and Ryan goes to Arizona, like it sounds like he could, then I think they'd try to backtrack quickly to get Taron Armstrong. But he might at that point be off the market, or he might say, I'm nobody's second choice. I don't know. Maybe he decides to go to Creighton. I don't know. But yeah, right now Gonzaga is kind of putting all their eggs in the Ryan Nembhard basket, and truthfully, it could go either way. Arizona, he's got that relationship with Tommy Lloyd, obviously with Gonzaga. His brother has that relationship there with the program, but Tommy Lloyd was at Gonzaga, so that one could go either way. Taron Armstrong, definitely will be watching that closely. He's really, really good. Didn't get a lot of attention, again, because he played for Cal Baptist. Watching those late night West Coast games, you guys would be surprised. There's some really good players out there, and we're seeing them hit the portal. We're seeing them get picked up by some high major programs. This is good. I'm glad you guys are here asking questions. All right, so we got obviously an Auburn fan. This is good. How do you feel about Denver Jones transferring to Auburn? Heard he's a lethal scorer. Yeah, I was, so Arkansas, of course, they are in on everyone, right? Like they have, I think they're up to 95 transfers contacted. They were trying to push to 100, but I think even them, it was getting hard for them at a point. But Denver Jones was a guy that I really liked for them. I thought of all the guys they did contact, this was the kid that they was like tailor-made for their program. Like they should have gotten him. Then I saw how they're loading up on guards, and it would have ended up being a bad situation for him because there's just not enough basketball. I will get into the SEC more. I have Arkansas fans that follow me, so I'm not trying to trash Arkansas, but I have a lot of question marks about how they're building that guard rotation and if there's going to be enough basketball going around. The only guard they brought on that doesn't need the ball in his hands constantly is Tremont Mark. He's fine, but they've got 4 others who are going to require the basketball a lot. I'm not sure that's going to end up. So for Denver Jones' sake, it's actually really, really good that he ended up going to Auburn instead, because he's going to have that opportunity to really, be a combo, facilitate, get a bucket when they need it, play in this, fast-paced environment where his play style will thrive a ton for this team. He is a guy that literally can score from anywhere with all 3 levels, but he can, drive if he needs to get to the foul line and get there. He has a high foul rate, or high fouls drawn rate, I should say. One of the better free throw rates when he was at FIU, about an 86% shooter from there, just under 40% from long range. That's on volume, about 165 attempts. And overall, on his 2-point field goals, shot about 59% because he drove to the hoop so much. He got a lot of high percentage looks, and he still has 2-3 seasons left. So it's an absolute home run for Auburn to get. Really overlooked coming out of high school, and has had really just 2 banger seasons at FIU. FIU didn't really get any attention because they were 14 and 18. There just wasn't a lot around him. They had really, really lower quality talent around him. Arturo Dean was quite good, a Miami kid. Those 2 together, they played really well as a backcourt, but they just didn't have enough to win ball games. He will really thrive at Auburn because there'll be high quality talent around him, right? And the ability to kind of maybe even unlock an aspect of his game that we didn't get to see quite as much when he was at FIU, because he was having to take on such a high amount of the scoring load. Rock solid defender, can turn, defense into offense quickly, good ball anticipation, able to, as one-on-one defender, get steals, force turnovers, kickstart the fast break. Like there's just not a lot of negatives for me to say about Denver Jones. He was one of my favorite guards coming out of the portal early on. And like I said, I have a lot of friends who are Arkansas guys, and they were all asking me like, this is the guy we're looking at. What do you think? And then, of course, they went and talked to 1,800 other people and lost out. But, this is huge. And he comes into a situation where Zep Jasper's finally out of eligibility, I believe. Chance Westry, we know he's gone off to another program. And I believe Wendell Green is probably staying in the draft. You might know more than me if you follow the team. But, he's just stepping into a fantastic situation. And I don't think it'll be a situation, sometimes with up transfers, it's a little bit worrisome, but at least from FIU to the SEC, it's, from the Conference USA, it's obviously Conference USA is way down here. SEC is way up here, but it's not like he's coming from, the NEC or, a really, the SWAC or something like that, not to be negative towards those conferences or anything, but I think he'll do just fine. And if you look at games over the course of his short career here, they got their doors blown off by NC State earlier in the season, but he looked really comfortable against them, had 19 real points, generated a ton of offense, was hitting shots, just, that there's really short sample for games against P5, but in the short games that they did have, he looked just fine. So he's going to be really, really good. You guys are going to definitely love what you get out of him. And he's going to be somebody from a DFS and prop betting standpoint that we're able to rely on heavily. And he has a few seasons left. If he, I don't think he'll jump to the NBA after 1 year. So you'll have him for that little bit of time there. So definitely like him. I think you all get Katie Johnson back too, right? And then Chance Westry, where did he go? Syracuse. I don't know how that's going to work out, but I would have liked him to come back too. But yeah, you guys are definitely going into a semi-new era here with a strong player. And of course, my man, Janai Broom, as long as you got him, geez, the sky's the limit. So Denver and Broom together, that's a nice little duo there. I'm excited about that. Tyson, if they contacted Jalen Tyson, so he's so good, so athletic. I was actually semi-surprised he hit the portal, but it came out the reason he hit the portal is not because he didn't want to be there for the new regime. It was that they just didn't contact him. He hadn't heard anything from the program for 3.5 to 4 weeks. Felt a little spurned about that. Felt like, hey, I'm one of the faces of this franchise or this program, I should say, right? Sometimes it feels like a franchise. And they didn't reach out to him. They just left him in the dark. So he decided to hit the portal. He has an endless amount of suitors. Love his game. If he were to go, if Auburn got Jalen Tyson, that would be magnificent because they would have 3 really strong players at those primary positions in the post, the wing, and the perimeter. And they would be really tough to defend. And Tyson's worked really hard. He didn't play that much at Texas, very little, but he turned himself into coming out of high school. He was a decent enough shooter, but this season at Texas Tech, he really turned himself into a strong 3-point shooter. I was really impressed with the way his shooting improved throughout. And he's always been a really strong on ball and help defender. And a strong enough defender or rebounder as well that he can contribute in all these categories. And he doesn't have to score to affect games. We saw there were a couple of games there in the late to mid part of February where he really took off. I mean, he had a 27 real point game against West Virginia. He had a couple of games like against Kansas, 13 actual rebounds. That was really impressive against that Kansas front court. 10 rebounds against the Baylor front court, 14 rebounds against a very tough Texas squad. So he's shown the ability to get it done in a multitude of ways. That excites me. That's great that you guys reached out. There's going to be a lot of competition for him. He is a Texas kid, so I don't know if there's any Texas programs, Baylor, that may reach out and try to get him. But Auburn would be a match made in heaven for sure. Tyler Perry, Johnny's asking about talking about Tyler Perry. Yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed. I think Bama has work to do, by the way, but it's definitely not shocking that he decided to cancel his trip to Bama. He is going to be announcing his commitment on May 2nd. He's down to his final four, which is Ole Miss, which I believe is probably the favorite with Chris Beard. Texas Tech, who has a ton of holes and a lot of opportunity, but I really hope he doesn't go there. Although if he wants to stay in the Texas area, there's that opportunity. Florida Gators, who have done really good in the portal. We'll talk about them in a second. And then Kansas State, which if we're talking from a strictly fantasy perspective, DFS, PrizePicks, Dynasty, props, all that, Kansas State is the number one spot of those four. There is a couple of holes for Kansas State. They've got to keep this momentum going. They had a really nice season. Jerome Tang's staying. I thought he might get the Texas job, but they did the right thing there. Another season at K-State. He's going to have the opportunity to build on that. Marquise Noel has exhausted his eligibility. Guys like Ishmael Massoud have hit the portal again. He's got some role players back, but they have an opening here. They've been in the Final Four for several high-profile guards, by the way. They just haven't closed the door or finished the deal. But they're in on Tyler Perry, and I love his game for Kansas State. I think he could step in there and be a big-time factor. But it does seem like Ole Miss is the favorite. After the Ole Miss trip, he canceled the Alabama trip. And usually when that happens, that probably means he's trying to go to Ole Miss. Ole Miss has Chris Beard basically – I don't know that he actually pushed Day Ruffin out, but, he probably pushed Day Ruffin out. So high-usage kid. Young Day Ruffin into the portal. They already had Amory Abram, another young kid, hit the portal. So they're basically James White hit the portal, I believe. Pretty sure he actually committed too. I'll have to pull that up and see. So they're a total rebuild there at Ole Miss, and it's probably for the best. So Perry have an opportunity to come in and do his thing there. James White goes to UAB, by the way, from Ole Miss. My guys at UAB. They've got a little bit of a semi-rebuild on their hands too. So Tyler Perry, we'll see what he does there, but he's got a lot of talent, obviously. Conference Player of the Year. We'll see what happens with that. Other portal chain or news, I should say, here in the last day or two. Here, I see you mentioned the Towson kid. So Nicholas Timberlake, another guy that St. John's was in on or really wanted. He decides to go to Kansas. Now, I've seen people are really getting quite excited about this one. I worry about him going to Kansas slightly. They need scoring, certainly. So as a 42% three-point shooter, high shot rate kid, he's going to offer that. Now, if Kansas is going to be built around KJ Adams, who comes back and showed flashes this past season, we know how good he's going to be offensively. He's going to have to make that next step. And DeJuan Harris, who did finish the year at 41% from three-point range, by the way, on 74 attempts, but not really known as a scorer. He was at times forced to be a scorer, but really he's an elite defender and a strong passer. So if you're going to be built around those two, you got to get some role players in that can knock down shots, or guys who can come in and get a bucket when your offense goes stagnant. So Timberlake's going to be able to offer them that. I'm seeing people talk like he's going to be, a big-time star. I'm seeing people, calling him, Klay Thompson and stuff like that. Might be a little bit homerism going on, but he's good. He's definitely good. They've got to replace a lot with Grady Dick and Jalen Wilson gone. I mean, there's a lot, MJ Rice, who I know he barely played, but the kid you're going to see how good and how talented MJ Rice is here real soon. But they've got a lot of pieces that they're going to have to account for. Bobby Pettiford gone, Joseph Yesufu gone. So I think Timberlake offers them, some big time scoring upside and three-point shooting that he's definitely going to be able to play a lot of minutes for them. Not surprised that he went there. I think Kansas, at the end of the day, they'll be in on a few more guys as well. Let me see here. Tyreke Smith from Oklahoma State back in the portal. By the way, Oklahoma the other Siena kid, JV and McCollum. So they're the top two guys for Siena. I tweeted this out earlier too. Both got higher major transfers. McCollum heading to Oklahoma to play for Porter Moser. That's a pretty exciting one there. I think he has an opportunity to play quite well. MJ Rice, speaking of him, he's transferring to NC State. That is a pretty big deal there. I think that he's going to have the opportunity. He's from Durham too, so he gets to come home a little bit. The opportunity to step in and play big minutes right away. Really still raw, of course, but generally you're not ranked at the top of your class if you're not really good. We've seen some big time whiffs. The rankings can sometimes be really off, and I don't think that this is the case with the MJ Rice, that they are off. I just don't think that he was healthy enough and didn't get the opportunity. And generally, the younger guards for Bill Self aren't the ideal fits. They just don't get playing time like they probably should. So I'm excited to see what MJ Rice can actually do here for this team and for NC State. You mentioned, Johnny, that Keats has been pretty busy in the portal. He has. He's been in on a lot of guys. They've been contacting a lot of higher level players. The Rice, get was nice. Jaden Taylor from Butler, that was a nice guard get. DJ Horn from ASU. I think DJ Horn showed some real good flashes at the end of the Pac-12 season that he can really contribute here. So bringing in Horn, Taylor, and Rice, that's a really good trio to kind of, build around here, depending on what happens with some of these other, players here that are moving on or going pro. Obviously, Greg Gant's gone. Jack Clark headed to Clemson. A little sad to see him go from NC State. They do bring in also Ben Middlebrooks, who is a role player from Clemson. So they pulled a little bit of a swap there. Middlebrooks for Clark. Middlebrooks a decent enough scorer. Keats has done well with these 4s and 5s that don't actually require the ball or don't have to score to be effective. Like Middlebrooks will come in, he'll block shots, he'll get rebounds. He won't need to have any plays run for him, and that's kind of good in the Keats offense because it's really guard reliant, and they need their guards to score, and they're going to have that opportunity with Rice, Taylor, and Horn. So definitely a nice thing going here for NC State. I think that they'll be competitive once again. I know Keats fell off for a year or two there, but just it's hard not to see what he did in the past. Guys like Markel Johnson, he's brought in some real good talent there, and I think that they'll be back in the tournament here, and at the very least, a higher echelon ACC team with the group that they're bringing in. Losing Turk Smith and Jarkel Joyner is obviously tough. A lot of teams would not be able to sustain after those losses, but I think that they've done enough here with what they've brought in to do well. And it's a shame that Jarkel Joyner didn't come to NC State sooner or wasn't there from his freshman year, because he was perfect for Keats. I'm going to miss him. That's one I'm going to definitely miss, is Jarkel Joyner. Other moves here, let's pull it up. There's this crazy amount of stuff in the portal. If you guys have any teams you want to talk about as well, we can definitely do so. Johnny, your Stanford boys bringing in Jared Bynum. That was a little bit of a shock to me as well, but high usage guy, can score in droves. I think the Pac-12, coming from a tough conference like the Big East to an easier one like the Pac-12, I think he's going to do some damage for Stanford, and they've got a good class coming in, as you know. So I think they'll be all right. Cole Bajema from my Huskies going to Utah. I think that's fine. They kind of trade, Lazar Stefanovic heads to UCLA from Utah. They bring in Bajema. They're kind of the same player, so that helps them in that regard. Badge is a decent enough shooter. Defense is fine. I think it's an okay play or an okay option there. Julian Roper from Northwestern heading to Notre Dame. Notre Dame has quite a few pieces that they've got to replace. Obviously, Starling headed to Syracuse there, and Cormac Ryan in the portal. So Roper gets an opportunity to come in at Notre Dame and get some minutes. Talked about Jordan Gainey. How about VCU? VCU, they have had major turnover. Of course, they guys coming and going, and coaching changes. So there's a lot of definite, new look teams here. And we've seen like Ace Baldwin, he goes over to PSU, Nick Kern, Jameer Watkins, all those guys leave. Jaden Nunn has taken off. Jaden Nunn heading to Baylor. That's big time. I love Jaden Nunn. I think he's going to do really well for Baylor. Jameer Watkins heading to Florida State. That's a fine enough fit for him. Of course, Ace Baldwin, like I said, heading over to Penn State, trying to get some of that Jalen Pickett magic. We'll see how that works out for him. I definitely like that. Nick Kern also going to Penn State. Of course, they followed their coach there. So there's a total, reset here for VCU. Now they have brought in some pieces. My man Joey Bam, was at Oklahoma this past season. Couldn't get his defense right. Was decent enough at Virginia Tech. Then he goes to George Washington, absolutely crushes it at George Washington. And then Oklahoma showed flashes, but just defensively, it wasn't a good fit with Porter Moser. So going to VCU, I think we see Joey Bam get more minutes and play to the level we're accustomed to with him. They get Jason Nelson, who was a freshman at Richmond last year, 5'10" kid, just a jitterbug of a player, but he's definitely solid. I like seeing him. I think at VCU, he'll play a big role for them. He played big minutes for Richmond, but Richmond was just so awful at all defensive categories. It was just really tough. And then they bring in the kid from Louisville, Roosevelt Wheeler, to play the 5. So VCU, and these are all younger kids too, so they'll be able to develop, grow, and do some things with them. But VCU is definitely headed in the right direction, at least. And that's something that, with a new coach can sometimes be tough when your program gets gutted or you're inheriting a total rebuild, but they have done decent with it. Let's see. Washington State gets a D2 stud from Sonoma State, Jalen Wells. So going to the Pac-12 is going to be somebody who terrorizes us and my Huskies and your Stanford guys, but he's definitely good. Creighton, talk about Creighton a little bit here. I saw you mentioned Creighton there in the chat. Stephen Ashworth, probably as good a fit as anyone in the portal there. Losing Ryan Nemhart, that's tough. I think that Ashworth can come in, be a big time scorer, a big time facilitator, and play those huge minutes that will be required, because we know Creighton, they run their starters on the ground, and Ashworth will be used to that. So I think it's a good fit there overall. Washington was actually in on him nearly to the very end, by the way, but I think it's a good fit. Trey Alexander, as of now, still there. Ryan Kalkbrenner, assuming he comes back, which he should. There is some talk that Arthur Kaluma's 50-50 right now, whether he'll be back. Baylor Shireman is back. So they've got themselves a strong starting group, regardless of what happens there with Kaluma. But I will challenge any Creighton fan or anyone, who likes Creighton heading into the season. Depth is going to be an issue. They're still, the little bit of depth they did have is gone. Like Ben, Schlotzberg, he's transferred. They did get the Virginia kid, Isaac Trout. He transferred over from Virginia to Creighton, so they've got a depth piece there. But overall, this is a team, they needed an infusion of talent. They've got to get some guys who can give them solid minutes off the bench. And I know sometimes the depth talk or the bench talk can be a little overrated. There were teams last year in the tournament, not this past season, but 2 years ago, that had some of the lowest bench minutes in all of college basketball, Kansas, and made the run to the title. But you got to at least have somebody who can give you some minutes. Injuries happen, fouls happen. There's so many different variables that can happen. You got to have bench pieces, and Creighton just didn't have that. So we'll see what happens. Trout is at least a solid piece, but as it stands right now, if Kaluma walks, he's going to probably start. They do have Mason Miller and Frederick King. Frederick King, showed flashes last year when Kalkbrenner was out. So they've got some front court guys who can do damage. But at this point, I think they've got to make sure Trey Alexander returns, and they've got to make sure that Ryan Kalkbrenner return. As long as those two things happen, they'll be competitive, but they'll fall short of being an Elite Eight Final Four team for me personally. And I could definitely be wrong about them. Last year, everyone was crowning them a Final Four squad after signing Baylor. But again, they need depth. That's something that they're going to have to definitely figure out. Sam asks, is Jalen Tyson better at the 2 or the 3? I think better at the 3 because of his ability to rack up rebounds, and he's actually he can defend multiple positions. So you can put him on a team's best like off-ball guard or best scorer just fine, but he can also guard a team's best wing. But I do think the 3 is the better spot for him. Johnny thinks Kaluma comes back. Yeah, I think it's truly 50-50, but we'll see. I don't think he has a reason to leave. There's no situation for Kaluma to go transfer to that'll be better than what he's in right now. He's going to have a lot of minutes at his disposal, and coming back for his 3rd season, there's a lot of continuity there. Even losing Nembhard, Ashworth is so important that they won't see a big fall off there. And if anything, his passing ability, and Nembhard's a damn good passer, so I don't know how I can say this without sounding negative, but it might actually give them a little bit more on offense with Ashworth because of his ability to pull up and hit threes as well. Corey, Auburn may hire Corey Williams, assistant coach from Texas Tech. People are saying Auburn has a good chance at Jalen Tyson. I hope, yeah, man, that would be awesome. I would love to see it. Would absolutely love to see Tyson at Auburn because with Broome and Denver Jones, like those 3 guys would play together so well. And athleticism would be crazy. Johnny, you can talk about Hubert Davis. Let's get into some other teams here. Teams that have been quiet, like Arizona, they're in on my guy Raekwon Battle, but they have been really, really quiet and they've lost pieces. There is a freshman that they're in on that they've got to get, and they're really heavy on Nembhard. That's really the only news. Otherwise, they've been pretty quiet in the portal. They've got to make some stuff happen. Kansas State hasn't really, even though they've been in a few teams top 4, a few players top 4s, they haven't finished or ended up landing any big name recruits just yet. So they've got some work to be done there. St. John's, as I already mentioned, they need to get some names. Miami has been extremely quiet. Isaiah Wong has declared for the draft and he won't be coming back. So there's, some work to be done there for Miami. I think at this point we have to trust Larinaga and what he can do. They do bring back Nigel Pack. They bring back Wooga Poplar. I think Wooga Poplar is going to be a very trendy breakout pick for this year. Norchad Omir's back. So you've got that trio of Pack, Wooga, and Norchad, and then even Bensley Joseph, who is decent enough. Wong going pro. Jordan Miller has exhausted eligibility. They're going to have to bring some guys in here at some point. Keyshawn George is a freshman coming in that has committed, so they've got him. They're in on the Tyler Bay kid. A lot of people have offered Tyler Bay, but they've got some work to be done. It's actually kind of, I'd say it's almost alarming that they haven't been on anyone, but it's so early in the portal season, and we have to remember that Portsmouth tournament just happened. Where some guys who do have the option to come back, doing the pro camps, doing the draft workouts, getting information on where they might land or what they need to work on, and those guys that are remaining, they're keeping and retaining their college eligibility are hitting the portal as well. So we're going to see more guys hit the portal here after they get some of the draft news, or guys who don't stay in. So even though some of your teams have maybe not hit on players or they haven't been as active as you'd like, there's still a lot to be done. There's over 1,200 kids in the portal now, and I'm expecting a lot more to be entering here over the next, month or two, month and a half, especially after the draft or after the draft deadline. Harlan Beverly, they lost him too, by the way. He's ended up with Wichita State, which is a team that's been making some moves. So Miami's definitely got to get themselves another guard and a Jordan Miller replacement, which will not be easy. Replacing Jordan Miller is, they don't got kids like that, coming by very often. Cal, with the new coach Mark Madsen, would have loved to have seen Stanford bring in Mark Madsen, but he has done some early work for them, turning that roster over. They bring in Fardaws, Emek, the athletic shooting big man who was at Texas Tech the past, season. Obviously crushed it at Utah Valley. So they've got bringing him in. They're bringing in Jalen Cone by way of NAU. He was with Virginia Tech there for a season or two. Then he did really well for Northern Arizona, coming out to there's going to be a lot of scoring opportunities for Jalen Cone. So I like what Madsen's doing. He plays a really fun style of basketball, a really fast-paced style, and there's going to be a lot of DFS excitement there for this club under Mark Madsen. They've got some more work to be done. I think really with the current roster, they should only need to bring back Grant Newell and Andy Okafor and then just build around, Amek. Kwani hit the portal, so that's, a primary piece from last year that left. Sam Alajicki has transferred to Rice, so he's gone. Joel Brown is in the portal. Get him out of here, Joel Brown. He's just got to go. But it's going to be fun. I think they'll be a lot better, obviously, under Madsen, and there's an exciting bit of upside there with him as their coach. Jared Hyder hit the portal as well. Hasn't been playing much for them the last 2 years anyways, but they're starting from scratch there and got some good pieces to build around. Speaking of North Carolina, they need Dalton next. They need Dalton, Johnny. They really need to get him. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why they're kicking their feet. I'm not sure why it's not a done deal yet. It sounds like Oregon is really heavy on Dalton next. I really am upset if Oregon gets him. Oregon has a ton of holes, a lot of guys hitting the portal. They can offer him a ton of opportunity, but so can North Carolina. North Carolina is still chasing the Brady Manick, trying to fill the Brady Manick role that was so successful when they made their run. They tried to use Pete Nance in that role. Just it didn't work out. He wasn't the same player. Dalton is when he was at Northern Colorado, solid enough rebounder, a really just borderline dead-eye shooter. Somebody that just fits that Brady Manick role so good. He's tailor-made to play for Hubert Davis and North Carolina. He's got just the one season left, but he won't shrink in the moment. He'll play fine in the ACC. Great numbers, high usage rate, high shot rate. Like, I really hope he doesn't go to Oregon. North Carolina's the team he should go to. Now, they did bring in Paxton Wojcik, an Ivy Leaguer. First started his career with Loyola Chicago, but played for Brown. So they're going to use him as a kind of a 3-point specialist, right? They also almost puzzlingly bring in Jalen Withers from North Carolina or from Louisville. I don't particularly understand the Withers, yet. Leaky Black, there's a hole there. Puff Johnson transferred. Dontrez Styles transferred. Tyler Nickel transferred. Tyler Nickel actually headed to Virginia Tech, where I think he'll actually play a lot. Sort of keep that name in the back of your mind for later. Dontrez Styles headed to Georgetown. And then Puff Johnson in the portal there, still looking for a home as well. So they do have this kind of 3-4 spot for Jalen Withers to play, but he just is his type of what he excels at just doesn't seem like it'll work for North Carolina. I don't know. I'm not sure about that one. Obviously Caleb Love off to Michigan. They bring back RJ Davis. They bring back Armando Bacot. The team will be built around those two, obviously. They do have Seth Trimble coming back for year 2. I think it'll be important for Seth Trimble to take that next step as a sophomore and really live up to his recruiting ranking. Him and Davis can take turns and almost be interchangeable as long as Trimble works on his shooting this summer and initiate the offense. DeMarco Dunn is there. They have him as a guy that can at least, another highly rated recruit from the past that can bring the ball up, initiate offense. He needs to take that next step. They've got a lot in play here. The roster as it stands right now: Trimble, Dunn, Davis, Wojcik, Withers, Baycott, Jalen Washington, right? He showed some flashes last year. And then they have a couple of walk-ons. So this is not the not looking great. Zayden High is a freshman that they signed. They're in on Brady Dunlap, which would be a big-time signing. And then, of course, Simeon Wilcher, who has the opportunity to play early. North Carolina needs to get somebody. They need Dalton Knecht. They probably, honestly, they need more than just Dalton Knecht, but he's going to set them on the right path. If they can get him to play the 4, they're back in business, because I think RJ Davis without Caleb Love can be really special. I think he can put up monster numbers, because a lot of those low percentage, borderline bad shots that Caleb Love was taking will now go to RJ Davis, and to a lesser extent, Wilcher, Dunn, Trimble, and Wojcik. But Davis is going to have the opportunity to have like a crazy high usage rate and take a ton of shots. Now, his assist rate will skyrocket too if they get a guy like Dalton Knecht, because he can hit threes. He can do a lot of damage. He can rebound well. He's going to be able to do some things that I just don't think that Withers can. Now, we did see last year, and Withers was in and out, he did shoot 42% from long range on 96 attempts. So I feel like Hubert's going to try and use Withers in that Brady Manic role because of how well he shot last year. But could that have been a blip possibly? Shot 44% in conference play. The year before that for Louisville, he shot 23% from long range and 38% the year before that, but it was only on 21 attempts in 20 games during his freshman year. Last year, on more volume, he shot low 20s. So I don't know. I'm more confident in a guy like Dalton Knecht than I am Jalen Withers, but I know what Hubert's trying to do, and he's going to try to use Withers in that role. I think that it's settling a little bit, and there's clearly more work to be done. This roster that they're sitting on right now can't be the final product. They've got to get some other guys in there and make some things happen. That's just the way it is. Yep, Caleb Love transferred to Michigan. Absolutely. It's Michigan. We'll talk about them in a second too. Definitely a surprising destination for him. But yeah, as it stands right now, those bad shots, like I said, that Love was taking, now go to RJ Davis. He's going to be able to take more of a role. And I think as long as they get a solid 4 in there, and Withers can be like a bench piece, then I think North Carolina looks a lot better. But if they're starting Withers, like if they're starting, November game 1, RJ Davis, Seth Trimble, Paxton Wojcik, Jalen Withers, Armando Baycott, I don't know. Baycott and Davis are good enough to carry, but sheesh, then what are you running off the bench? Like Dunn, Jalen Washington, Simeon Wilcher, Zayden High was probably not going to play very much. That's not going to get it done. So more work to be done for North Carolina, obviously. Let's go to Xavier. Here's a team that talking about teams that have been quiet or haven't done enough work, a team that has not been quiet and has been on several, top 4, top 5, top 10 lists for players and have done a really great job, actually. Jack Nungy's going pro. Probably will go overseas, but whatever. He's going to go pro. He's not going to return. Sully Boom has exhausted his eligibility. They, losing some key pieces here, but they have been able to bring in a myriad of high quality options. Starting at center to replace Jack Nungy, they bring in from North Texas sophomore Abu Osman. They just brought him in within the last day or two. He's a little undersized to play center, but that's okay because in the Big East you can get away with that to a degree. He had an offensive rebounding rate of 12.5%, a combined rebounding rate of 30, high usage rate, high shot rate, playing next to Tyler Perry, of course, who was great. But they also had the second guard, Kai Huntsberry, and both of those guys were solid. Huntsberry was especially good as a passer and lead guard, and fed Osman the ball a lot, put him in a good position to score. He really, really, when healthy, and he missed some time with injury, when healthy, was one of the best rim protectors in the conference and was one of the best rebounders in the conference. So what they're losing with Nunge is a stretch big ability to hit threes. Osman's not going to give them any ability to shoot from outside, but I think they've done enough at the other positions and the guards they've brought in to mask that a little bit. And Osman will be able to excel as a high-level rim protector, high-level rebounder. His block rate, was over 7% throughout the conference season. So that was a good move on their end to bring him in as a replacement. They also bring in Logan Duncombe, a transfer from Indiana. Probably haven't heard much about him. He was just a lesser used role player. Definitely has some upside, though. I think, another kid, he's about 6'11". He can definitely play. If they need him to, play 30 minutes, I think that could be a problem. But as a bench piece playing, 15 to 18, I think he has some upside there. So I do think they've done a good job there with their front court. The back court replacing, Boom, that's tough. Desmond Cloud, he's coming back for a year or two. I think the expectation is that he's going to be really, really good this year and take on more of the load. But they bring in the Rice transfer, Quincy Oliveri, who is good, high usage scorer. Had this discussion with my friend Corey, who is a Xavier fan. I don't like him if he's being brought in to be solely Boom. I think that when you look at Rice, they had basically three guys, a three-headed monster at Rice of guys who would score or be relied on for a high usage role or to hard carry the team. Oliveri definitely one of them. Travis Evie, who was my guy, and Max Fiedler. When they were at their best was when Evie was just bombing from three and hitting, or when he would get red hot, Reggie Miller style, or Fiedler, who is more of a 5 or 4 or 5, was out there, getting these really easy buckets. They're hitting him in the post. He's doing his thing. He's getting very easy putbacks, and they're making that entry pass. He had some really strong games, some huge monstrous double-doubles throughout the season. And Oliveri had some big games. I mean, his usage rate, shot rate, 30% shot rate, 27% usage rate. I mean, the kid can play. But very inefficient at times, and he's a volume guy like Keon Menefield. And volume scores can sometimes be tricky because it's hard to tell just how good they actually are, because, if a guy's taking 20-plus shots, he's, it's going to get there eventually. I like Oliveri as a secondary piece, not to be solely Boom. I don't think he's going to excel as a offensive initiator carrying the team. I think he's much better as, like I said, a off-ball guard or a piece that is playing next to other high-level scorers or guys who can really take over a game, like he had at Rice. Now, they also bring in WKU transfer Davion McKnight, who is ultimately going to play at point. I believe they'll move Oliveri as the 2 guard there, but they've got Desmond Cloud as well, where they could theoretically run a small ball lineup and have Oliveri play the 3, Cloud play the 1, and Davion McKnight play the 2. So they've got a little bit of smaller lineup there that could play fast and do some damage. Now, Davion McKnight is another guy that can be considered more of a volume scorer. He's a much better passer, very solid assist rate, almost 30%, all 3 of his collegiate seasons. Good at getting to the foul line, very high level free throw shooter. His 3-point shooting ability, not the best, low 30s, but he can work on that. But other aspects of his game definitely are a lot like Solly Boom. He is more of, to me, the Solly Boom direct replacement than Oliveri is, because of his passing, because of his on-ball defense, his ability to get free throws. It's just that 3-point shooting that could be the Achilles heel there. So I do like McKnight in this Xavier offense quite a bit. But we'll see how they ultimately, under Miller, roll this lineup out here, because you can run a lineup with McKnight, Oliveri, Cloud, Zach Fremantle, and then, Abu Osman. Like, that's a pretty solid starting lineup. I think that can compete in the Big East. Where it could get tricky for them is bench-wise. They definitely need to add a few more pieces here. They do have some freshmen coming in, guys like Trey Green, Reed Ducharme, Dylan Swain. Like, they've got some pieces coming in here, but more unknowns. I think portal-wise, they should definitely try to bring in 1 to 2 more pieces if they have those scholarships available. But Xavier has definitely been active, and they've done really, really well. Let's talk about Michigan. Since you guys have both brought up Michigan, Johnny's saying he saw a top 5 for Matthew Cleveland. Is that a top 5 that you actually saw, or is that what you think, though? I've seen. Let's pull this up. And we'll be wrapping it up. We just got about 10 more minutes here. Appreciate you guys hanging out with me. This is like, I love, like, I was a dude playing, Madden and the college sports games, and doing, like, the roster building and the transfers and the trades and all that stuff. So that's my thing. So those of you that like it too, can definitely hang out with me all summer long here. All right. So Michigan, I don't know what Juwan Howard has ended up doing with Michigan. It seems like he may have won games with, Beeline's players, so it hasn't quite worked out. I'm really looking at what Michigan is potentially running out right now, and I'm having a hard time understanding how it's going to work out. They have brought in some pieces. They're obviously losing some important pieces. Jett Howard, they'll survive without him, another volume scorer. That's been fine. Joey Baker is going pro overseas. They offered Papa Conte, but he's going elsewhere. This is just Kobe Buffkin is going pro. It's just a really tough roster to look at. And it's, Caleb Love, he's not a great fit for this team, but I get what Juwan Howard's doing. He's bringing in a name, a brand name that people know to make a splash and draw excitement here and hopefully use him as a tool to bring in other transfer guys that can work out. Now, they brought in my guy from Alabama, Namari Burnett, who has been injured throughout his early, young career. I like Burnett's defensive ability. I like his ability to hit shots. I think he can do fine for this Michigan team and actually fits what Howard would be trying to do. So I like Burnett there as a high-level role player. They bring in Seton Hall, Trey Jackson. A little bit puzzled there, especially if Terrence Williams is back, which I believe he is. I haven't seen anything to say he's not. So it seems a little odd. They've got Terrace Reed as their center. Obviously, we know Hunter Dickinson hitting the portal. I love Terrace Reed. Terrace Reed did really well for us last year in DFS as a lesser-used freshman that had a very high fantasy point per minute number. So the front court of Williams-Reed is okay. They bring in Jackson to supplement that. It's not great. They had Doug McDaniel is back as well, so that's good. As of now, you would be looking at like Doug McDaniel, Caleb Love, Namari Burnett, Trey Jackson, and Terrace Reed as your starting lineup, and Terrence Williams off the bench. It's not great. If they couldn't make the tournament with Hunter Dickinson, Terrence Williams, Jett Howard, Kobe Buffkin, Doug McDaniel, like if they couldn't make it with that group, I fail to see how they make it with this group. Now, they're going to get some more guys. They're in on a lot of high-level transfers final list, and they're going to end up landing 1 or 2 more guys. They'll get other pieces, but they'll get another 1 or 2 guys that's a name value, and that'll allow them to push a player like Namari Burnett or Trey Jackson to the bench, which is where they're better suited. They had some high-level freshmen signed, Yusuf Kayat, but ultimately they've got to, the way that the CBB landscape is right now, You got to have veterans. You got to have transfer portal guys. You have to have quality talent coming out of the portal, and you got to be able to win at the portal. So they'll have more guys. We'll see what happens there, and we'll see what happens with Hunter Dickinson. Right now, speaking of Hunter Dickinson, it really sounds like Kansas, which would be interesting. Playing Dickinson next to KJ Adams, I think, is a major win stylistically. Dickinson has shown an ability to step out and shoot a little bit, while KJ Adams hasn't. You can kind of flip-flop those guys and play Adams as the 5, Dickinson as kind of a stretch 4, or vice versa. So I actually think Dickinson to Kansas makes a ton of sense, an absolute ton of sense. I've heard talk of him going to Maryland. I've heard talk of Georgetown. I've heard talk of Bryant. All these programs, there's a lot in play here. But to me, the Kansas chatter regarding Hunter Dickinson is the most logical, and I think it actually has a fairly good chance of coming to fruition here and happening. So we'll see what happens there, but that's one that we'll be tracking. I'm not a big Hunter Dickinson fan, full disclosure, but I do like the fit potentially there for Kansas and how that would work out. And that domino, once that falls, that will definitely wind up determining, a lot of other programs, because there aren't a lot of quality bigs in the portal. I think there'll be still some players announcing and hitting that portal here soon. So there'll be a big time competition for bigs. Duke, Johnny's Duke, they could use a big. So, if one quality center comes into the portal, look for Duke to be in on them. And obviously a couple of other teams. Point guards and centers, they're in demand. They're always going to be in demand. And in this portal here, we're going to see quite a bit of competition for players that qualify for those positions. Harrison Ingram, lots of chatter for Harrison Ingram. I have also heard Kansas for Ingram. Kansas and Dickinson both could land at Kansas. I can't count Bill Self out. Bill Self is just a ridiculously good coach, and he definitely knows how to build a starting lineup. I'll say that. His overall rotation sometimes, to me, not that I can, who am I to question Bill Self, right? But I'll armchair quarterback it here. I think sometimes he brings in the wrong guys for his depth or his rotation. But when it comes to a starting 5, Bill Self gets the most out of his guys. So I'm confident he's going to hit a couple home runs here. It's crazy to think that you could lose Bobby Pettiford, MJ Rice, and I know neither of those guys did anything for Kansas, but wait until you see how those guys do this year. Those are 2 high-level talents. The fact that Self cannot use guys like that and still excel shows you how good of a coach he is, and it shows you how much talent he has at his disposal. Losing Grady Dick, losing Jalen Wilson, expect a big drop-off, right? I don't know that we'll see a big drop-off. I feel like KJ Adams is going to have, a really breakout style year. We saw some major flashes for him this year. He played like I thought Zach Clements would end up playing. It didn't come to fruition for Clements. It just didn't work out. I think we could see a David McCormick-esque, breakout for Adams, especially if he gets to play next to Hunter Dickinson. If Harrison Ingram, who we know is quite good and has a massive laundry list of teams after him, the Stanford transfer, coming to Kansas, he, fits really well. He's exactly the type of wing that Bill Self loves and has been able to turn into really quality, player, borderline, All-American. So there's some pieces in play here, and Kansas is certainly in on all of them. So Vanderbilt signs Lehigh kid Evan Taylor. So Vanderbilt, who has lost quite a few pieces, they brought in some pieces. And there has been I'll dedicate a half on one of the shows coming up to, we always talk about low to mid majors transferring up, but we don't always talk about the high majors transferring down. And there are a plethora of guys, and I just thought of this because of Vanderbilt. Guys like Noah Shelby, highly rated recruit, transfers to Rice. I think he has the opportunity to be really, really good. Like, I'm excited about Noah Shelby. I'll be definitely tracking him there. Malik Dia, who is a raw but talented kid, stays in the Tennessee area, goes to Belmont. I think he will have the opportunity to play really well for Belmont. So there's going to be a lot of guys there that we can talk about transferring down that are going to give themselves the opportunity to dominate or have a high usage role and then possibly transfer back up. Like, there's no shame in doing that. But the Evan Taylor kid that they just got from Lehigh, he's pretty solid. I think Stackhouse will use him in an intelligent way. We know Vanderbilt's, they haven't completely turned their roster over, but shoot, it's definitely crazy out there. But Taylor, a wing player, 43% three-point shooter, 28% shot rate, just a strong rebounder, a kid that I think will play well. Super senior, somebody who won't fold in the moment. Yes, sir. Ray Battle to San Francisco. There's a lot of chatter there. Now, like I said, the top, there was a top four posted by Rothstein, but then people are telling me it's not a real top four. But I've seen a lot of USF, as in South Florida, and I've seen a lot of San Fran talk. Now, of course, a lot of people think Utah State will get him because Coach Sprinkle went there from Montana State, and that would make the most logical sense. But Battle's clearly a talent that can go to a P5 team if he wants. So we'll see what happens. But the Dons are definitely in on him. There has been a lot of WCC transfers. I think the WCC is going to be pretty solid in a year where Gonzaga might be a little less daunting than they normally are. There's going to be the opportunity for teams like Santa Clara, like LMU, to make a little bit of noise. And Santa Clara is a team, really liked them the end of, last, 2 or 3 months of the season last year. We were making so much money off the props for Santa Clara players, right? Brandon Podziemski, especially. Pods was, he only missed his prop once, the over once in 3 months, obviously going pro. But they've got some guys coming in, Arizona transfer Adama Ball, who couldn't get much minutes there. Jalen Benjamin, who has been played for UAB, Mount St. Mary's. He's been around the block, but going to Santa Clara to play. Herb Sendek, man, don't sleep on a little bit of Santa Clara here with Coach Sendek. They do lose Carlos Stewart, who's headed to LSU, by the way, but they do bring in Tyree Bryan, who's a JUCO kid, and they have a couple of other guys in the pipeline that they're working on. Francisco Cafaro, who is a Virginia transfer, he is headed over to Santa Clara. Johnny O'Neal, who is an American transfer from the Patriot League. So I like this Santa Clara team. They've been doing some damage here, and there's a couple of teams, man, in the WCC that are making moves. So you'll see what's it. Let's go to the Dons. Let's see what the Dons got, because obviously they're going to be turning it over a little bit. Their flagship get so far is Malik Thomas, who is a USC transfer, shooting guard. So he's going to be really good. I think we could see him turn in a Khalil Shabazz, Tyrell Roberts type of career. And the Dons are clearly not done. They're going to be bringing in plenty of pieces here. So we'll see what happens with them. Your boy Jaden Dallaire is back in the portal there. LMU, Loyola Marymount, they've done a decent enough job in the portal. They do bring in Justice Hill. Justice Hill, of course, started his career for Arkansas. This dude's been in I don't know. He's been in college for like 7 years, I think is what it is. Murray State, LSU, Arkansas. Now he's over at LMU. So Justice Hill playing for them there. They have offered Mike Meadows, who is the Portland transfer. It sounds like they have a really good chance at getting him. Your boy Noah Tates, who is a Stanford transfer, he's over there now. Justin Wright, who comes from the high-level scorer from North Carolina Central. So the WCC is making some moves, and I love to see Lars Tiemann, who is was he a Cal transfer, UCF transfer. He comes over to Loyola Marymount here, so there's a lot to be said about this WCC, and I just think that Gonzaga. Let's talk about Gonzaga for a minute, huh? I think they could be in a little bit of trouble. They roster wise, this is going to be one of their weaker rosters in a while. They have plenty of time to turn it around. They do have Alex Tuhey and Dusty Stromer coming in as freshmen. Now, Alex Tuhey is friends or has played with Taron Armstrong. So that's why I was thought that Gonzaga might be the favorites for him, because that relationship that they have there. Drew Timme, of course, gone. Julian Strother, of course, gone. Dom Harris hitting the transfer portal. Hunter Salas hitting the transfer portal. It does sound like Nolan Hickman is back, so they do get that continuity. Malachi Smith is, as of right now, entering the draft, but obviously a chance he could come back. He does still have his COVID year if he wants it. And then they bring in, so far, the Eastern Washington kid, Steele Venters, who's an exciting kind of like 3-4 combo wing. Definitely fits the mold of what Gonzaga, does, and can really maybe even turn into like a Brandon Clark type. And you got to like Ben Gregg. Ben Gregg showed flashes in small spurts last year, and then in the tournament he turned in some pretty solid performances for Gonzaga. So Ben Gregg, expecting him to take that next step. They've got pieces here, but looking at what they're rolling out at the moment, and there's still talk about Antoine Watson possibly walking away as well. I would really be shocked if he did, but they could be looking at some really big holes here. If they don't land Nembhard, I think they have to quickly regroup. They're going to have to really almost borderline beg Malachi Smith to come back, Rasir Bolton, because Dom Harris and Hunter Salas, both highly rated recruits, especially Hunter Salas, might have been a little overrated on his recruiting ranking, but losing those guys is going to ultimately end up hurting them. And as of right now, they're going to have to rely on Dusty Stromer to play big minutes coming in, and I don't think the WCC is as weak as people seem to think it is. This is a competitive conference, BYU be damned, that is going to be able to push Gonzaga to the brink. And Steele Venters was a good start, but it's not enough. As of right now, you'd be looking at Nolan Hickman, Steele Venters, maybe, Antoine Watson, Ben Gregg lineup with Dusty Stromer. It's not enough. It's just not enough. And they just brought in Efton Reed from LSU last year. He's already hit the portal again because there's just no minutes there waiting for him. I hope Gonzaga didn't blow it with Taron Armstrong, because if they did, it's going to be tough. If they whiff Nembhard, it's going to be tough. Yeah, Graham Ike from Wyoming. He was expected to go to – first he was expected to go to Colorado, backed out of Colorado because they got Lampkin. Obviously, they play the same position, so it makes sense. Then he was expected to go to Providence, but they have Oduro, so it doesn't make sense for him to go there. Gonzaga definitely needs a center because they can – Ben Gregg's better as a 4 or a bench player. So Ike could obviously step in and start at the 5 right away. So if they get him, it's not a guarantee, but they're definitely in a good position to get him. It helps push things along a little bit. But even with Ike, I mean, he missed so much time. I would still challenge anyone to tell me that this is a better roster than what they've had in the last 2, 3, 4 seasons, because it's not. Now, if they land Nembhard, they land Ike, they get Malachi Smith back with Steele Venters at the 3, then we're talking. We got a Gonzaga team here that can compete. But if they don't get Nembhard and Armstrong feels neglected, if you will, then Gonzaga's in trouble. So we'll see. I don't know. I don't agree. I don't know that they'll be good. But if they land all those guys, if they get all these pieces, then sure. But as it stands right now, they're not doing so well in the portal. Last couple of things here, and then we'll wrap up. And then we'll have a little bit more structure. This is one that I really wanted to just kind of chat and, kind of, just banter back and forth here and really just delve into it a bit. But starting next week, it'll be conference focused. I do want to have, like I said, a show dedicated to P5 transfers down. So what that might look like, if we'll get the opportunity to use them in fantasy purposes, and if betting future market, like we're going to be doing a lot with betting next year, right? So there's going to be opportunities for us to, how much affected is UNC Asheville with Greg Gant coming? Not very much, but there'll be other transfers going that are going to look quite well in these lower tier teams and conferences. A guy like Rylan Jones, who hit the portal today from Utah State, like he could end up going to a low major. Might he affect things? Possibly. We did see quite a bit of guys hit the portal the last couple of days. Again, Naheem McLeod from FSU, Tyreek Smith from Oklahoma State. Who else? Let's see. Quincy Guerrier hitting the portal from Oregon. That's he was really good at Syracuse, not so good at Oregon, but there he is back in the portal. Quarian McPherson from Nebraska. We're seeing, some pieces here sitting in the portal, and there's going to be even more hitting. So Ali from Butler. Speaking of, let's wrap the show up on Butler. What in the hell is going on here? Because Butler, they have the great moments there, almost making the title game in a couple seasons. They get Thad Matta in here, an absolutely atrocious season, 14-18, and then they proceed to lose really the only glimmer of talented guys there. Jaden Taylor, gone. Seamus Lukosius, gone. Chucky Harris, gone. Like, Ali hits the portal today. I'm just really struggling. Is Thad Matta washed? Like, why isn't he bringing anyone in? Chucky Harris goes to SMU, by the way, where he's going to absolutely just take 25 shots a game. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Now, they have brought some kids in. Pierre Brooks from Michigan State, who I think actually has a chance to be really good. Jameel Telfort, who they brought in just recently from Northeastern. He's decent enough. The St. Francis PA kid, Landon Moore, who's at this point, I guess, going to play point guard because Chuck Harris gone to SMU. Miles Tate, he's gone to Appalachian State. Jaden Taylor, he's gone to NC State. Like, this is crazy. This Butler team was really not good, but all of their guards are finding new homes, and they're not bringing in anybody. Now, they have brought in Andre Screen from Bucknell to play center, but this is a really dire situation. Really dire situation. Now, they do bring in a freshman, Finley Bizjack. A lot of people are excited about him, but this team here has a lot of work to be done. And with Ali hitting the portal now, it's a pretty bare cupboard. I'm looking at this roster, and I'm wondering how Thad Matta is going to fix it, because it just doesn't look great. Manny Bates is going to the pro level. Jalen Thomas, I think Jalen Thomas is even well, maybe not. I thought he was transferring, but I guess I don't see that here now. Connor Turnbull is a role player. Like, it's a dire situation here for Butler. Very, very dire. All right, so that'll wrap it up. Good stuff. Appreciate those of you who hung out with me. This is what we're going to do the next couple of weeks here. We'll next week we'll start with one of the P5 conferences, and we'll just work down from team to team. We'll talk about rumors. We'll talk about what they've lost, who they brought in, and we'll just kind of work our way through that. And by next week there'll be even more news. I'll be tweeting out nightly tweets about portal happenings, and I kind of doing my thing there. So make sure you're following me at Dub Deuces 85 if that interests you. Turn your noties on. I'm always talking about the various news and things that are going on. And again, all summer long, we're going to still be doing our thing with DFS, alt football leagues like the CFL, like the USFL. We've got the WNBA. We've got TBT. We're going to have plenty of opportunities here to make money. And let's end it on a true note here. The man that helped me win that 222 a month or two ago, the 10K to first tournament, I had to do it. It had to be done, Johnny and everybody. Dylan Disu had to do it. The cream white Longhorns jersey with the cursive writing there. Dylan Disu, let's go. That's going to be hanging up behind me for each show after a while here. Appreciate it, my man. Kurt hooked that one up, but it had to be done, my man. Dylan Disu. Any player that helps you win 10K, you got to support him. So that's it, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks very much. Check me out next Wednesday at 9 p.m. PST as we talk about more portal news, more off-season stuff, and we'll also be delving into during the day as it goes with the WNBA and all football. Lots of content at FTN, FTNBets.com, FTN Daily, and we also have FTN Season Long. If you use my code DUB, D-U-B, you get yourself an extra discount on your first month. It still works out great. We have content for pretty much every sport. And it's not just articles. We have optimizers. We have projections. We have all these proprietary tools that can help you be a winner. And we're also doing our thing, pushing the news, being the best company that we can be. And then once again, I appreciate everybody's continued support as a super show. We're continuing to go up, and we'll see you all on the moon when we get there. Thanks a lot. Take care, guys.